Monster Hunter Wilds heavily increased the maximum number of large monsters that can be present on a locale. There used to be a cap of 3 in Monster Hunter World and Rise, but Wilds increased the number to 8, allowing for extremely populated maps. This has given rise to a new feature, large monster packs, consisting of several full-fledged monsters that work together in a group. It was one of the first major features of Wilds to be shown off, where we saw Hunter being chased by several Doshagumas and later battling against them. But upon release, this feature ended up being rather underwhelming and perhaps even pointless, which led to disappointment. In this video, we're going to discuss the problems with packs in Monster Hunter Wilds, the fights themselves, how we're encouraged to engage with them, and the series' legacy with multi-monster battles. In truth, Monster Hunter has always had enemies that form packs. The very first hunting quest in the series puts you up against 3 Velociprey sometime before you face their leader, the larger Velocidrome. And most games have monsters that are accompanied by smaller minions. Kongolala and his Kongos, Great Jagia and his Jaggies. Same with the Great Jaguarison world. There will be at least 3 minions who serve to back up their leader, who is usually the main target of the hunt. The minions are often much less complicated in terms of behaviour and moveset, and their lack of health means they don't take much damage before they die, as opposed to their leader, who can put up much more of a prolonged fight. Wilds still has these traditional leader and minion battles, but it also introduced large monster packs, and the difference here is that they're made up entirely of large monsters. Take the Doshaguma. They can be encountered either on their own, or as parts of a pack, led by a stronger and special Alpha Doshaguma, who is larger with more red fur to distinguish him, but functionally, they're all still the same boss and monster. As mentioned earlier, the differences between large and small monsters are not just limited to size, but behaviour, health, and their capabilities of serving as meaningful and challenging boss fights. Small monsters are only really dangerous for beginners in the early game, or as distractions when fighting larger monsters. But the larger ones are the main attractions of these games, what we're all here for, and having them gang up together as packs could potentially serve as a major threat, providing much more complex and frantic battles against multiple threats at once. Packs were featured fairly prominently in the marketing for Wilds, namely in the early trailers, which really excited people. Unfortunately, the packs in Wilds fell short of expectations. First of all, there's only 3, Doshaguma, Hirobami, and Yankutsu. All of these monsters can be encountered either solo or in groups that stick together, but only the Doshaguma has a dedicated alpha that leads their respective pack. Hirobami and Kutsuku are encountered as trios and duos respectively that just stick together with no particular order. Curiously, the monster Balahara is shown in cutscenes and the Turf War, amassing as a group, but cannot be fought in packs in the same way. In terms of hunting and battling, packs can be dispelled either by firing individual dung pods at each member, or a large dung pod that affects them all. This causes the subordinates to scatter across the locale, isolating the pack leader and allowing you to battle and eventually slay him solo, effectively turning the highly anticipated pack hunt into a very ordinary one. This was a letdown. I really wanted to fight these guys as a group, but technically I can't do that if I simply refuse to use dung pods. But the game was very much designed with the idea that you use them on the packs, and this is evident if you forego them. In my experience, Doshaguma packs are total chaos. No rhyme, reason, or method to the madness, they're all attacking at once. Zero time to form a strategy as you get constantly battered around. The chaos is suffocating in a way that's kind of fun to marvel at, but it's not a very good boss fight. You can see me getting pummeled but somehow still surviving. Through no action of my own, the pack eventually split up and I slayed them all independently. Yankutsus are normally encountered as pairs by design, and that's manageable. Bring a third into the mix and once again it's total pandemonium. Fireballs everywhere, constant charging. There is an element of strategy, and I was able to win this fight by whistling them all down, but it was a struggle I would rather not repeat. Hirobami, funnily enough, works quite well as a pack. They group in 3s, and while the challenge is much higher than a solo Hirobami, the fight is still evenly paced, as they all sort of take turns attacking. You have to constantly weave around their attacks, but you're not getting piled up on like with Doshaguma and Kutsuku, which is further helped by a lot of Hirobami's attacks not really knocking you away. Furthermore, Hirobami has a lot of ways to temporarily disable him, which, if executed properly, can provide crucial moments to either heal up or concentrate your damage. In a pack, this grants you crucial breathing space that allows you to perhaps shift your focus to a different Hirobami. It ends up being challenging, but still rather fun. At launch, pack fights merely required you to slay the leader, but a later update added the ability to save investigations that required hunting every member. The footage I'm showing you for Hirobami is prior to that update. I was refusing to use dung pods in order to see how viable pack fights were without them. People were happy to see that update, but in my opinion, they don't really address the problems with packs, which would be: number 1, we want to fight the whole group, but it's way too easy to fire a dung pod and split them all up. And 2, even if we refuse to use dung pods in order to make things harder for ourselves, the Shaguma packs are too chaotic to have any fun with, arguably true of the Kutsuku as well. There's also an issue of there not being enough packs, but I'll leave that one alone because it's something that the expansion or a future game could address. Besides, more packs would simply accentuate the previous problems. Fact of the matter is, the two problems are not only linked, but are intentional choices. The reason it's so easy to disperse packs with dung pods is due to the fact that they're a nightmare to face as a group. Essentially, the game doesn't want you to fight them like this because it knows you probably wouldn't like it. The issue with that is many of us would actually like to fight the packs at their strongest and have it be a good experience. Having monster packs formed from full-fledged large monsters is unprecedented and a series first, but maybe there are reasons for why Wilds is the first game to have this feature. The first is hardware constraints. Wilds having such a high large monster count per locale is only possible through the power of the more modern CPUs of the PS5 and equivalent systems. It can keep track of 8 independent large entities all doing their own thing. This is what has made the Doshaguma, Kutsuku and Hirobami packs possible, because back then, it wasn't possible to have this many large monsters together, let alone with a bunch of others. The pre-world games even capped at 2. The second reason is that, for better or worse, intentionally or not, Monster Hunter has never really figured out multi-monster battles to make them fun or intuitive, but it never really had to, because they've been chaotic messes by design, obstacles you're supposed to overcome. Minions in prior games are generally not that strong on their own. Their strength comes into focus when they try to attack and overwhelm you during a hunt against a larger foe, but their numbers are balanced by their lack of health, which means temporarily shifting your attention to get rid of them can make things easier. That's not true when large monsters are together in the same space, because their complicated movesets and large health pools mean that dispatching them isn't a simple task. Fighting 2 opponents is difficult, and in Monster Hunter, they don't exactly sync their attacks or try to work together. The whole situation deteriorates rapidly. Consider invaders. When a Deviljho invades your hunt, it's probably not something you want to be happening. You're trying to hunt your own target, only for this behemoth to stomp and laser everywhere, interrupting and potentially either killing you or distracting you enough for the target monster to catch you off guard. You want him to go away, and so you can either fight him until he dies, which might not be possible depending on your gear, overall skill or time, or you could throw a dung bomb and he'll eventually leave. The dung bomb is an important tool that the game has presented to you for repelling him, because it's very much aware that having 2 monsters together is not a situation you'd like to be in, and it's not the only tool for dealing with such a problem. When fighting 2 monsters in an arena, there's often a fence gate that can be activated, separating them and allowing you to focus your attention on one only. The other will lose track of you and will not fly or dig to get past the fence gate, but it doesn't last, and upon going down, you must activate it again, which can be tricky as there's often a cooldown before it becomes available, and you have to make sure the monsters are separated before pulling the lever, all while dodging twice the attacks. Again, the game is fully aware that fighting more than one monster is challenging and has given you a tool of dealing with it, and that tool has its own caveats that you have to work around. There's also smoke bombs, critical for those battles that take place in special arenas with no fence gate to separate the targets. You just have to be coordinated enough to use them before you're spotted. Rathian and Rathalos are both fairly dangerous monsters, but when together on a locale, they have a special mechanic where the roars of one will attract the other, making dual hunts much more dangerous. Once more, you're encouraged to dung bomb them away, even if it only provides temporary relief. This is also true of Eteastra and Lunastra in Monster Hunter World, and they won't deliberately attack each other, and even have a special bond supernova under special circumstances. To reiterate, Monster Hunter treats having 2 or more monsters in the same place as a deliberate obstacle. The game doesn't pretend that these situations aren't chaotic or are easy to brute force through, and gives you tools for alleviating the situation, even if it's only brief. And this is the dynamic that fans have enjoyed. There's a reason why Deviljho or Bazelgeuse are so iconic, and recent games have implemented upsides for bringing monsters together, such as with Turf Wars, which can be a great source of free damage. Rise made multi-monster brawls a non-factor for locale quests, and it was a common criticism of the game. People do like the chaos they can bring. Packs in the older games being a bird wyvern or large monkey, accompanied by several younger versions, made more sense under the context of large monsters being oppressive. The minions provide support and do not dominate the battle. That role belongs to the leader. But with the Wilds packs, every member being a large monster means they all dominate the battlefield. On one hand, this is what makes them such a pain to fight together, and why the game makes it so easy to separate them. But on the other hand, this is what makes them so much more exciting than the older packs. On paper, the benefit to each member being a proper full-fledged monster means that when working together, they'll be so much more dangerous. In practice, however, it just leads to this total mess, which is a shame. So we've established how having multiple monsters in the same space historically has always led to uncontrolled chaos. But that's not the case with all monsters. Many of them do work together in interesting ways. An example would be the Celtus and Celtus Queen from Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. They're both large monsters, but one is much bigger than the other. The Celtus is encountered early in low rank, while the Queen is faced much later, and together. Their special mechanic is that the Queen can grab Celtus and place him on top of her back, which effectively turns her into a walking tank. They can attack independently, but can also perform several combined attacks. Dung bombing Celtus is a waste of time. He's not so much of a nuisance on his own, and he'll do his best to stay in the same area as the Queen anyway, so you're better off killing him when you get the chance. Due to the 2-monster cap of the older games, the Queen will usually be faced solo, to save a slot for Celtus, and killing him will cause another respawn. What's really fun is that Celtus Queen will sometimes eat him to regain stamina, when she's exhausted. I talked about minions in the older games, where you had a large monster, usually a bird, wyvern or monkey, leading some smaller versions. The Great Izuchi from Monster Hunter Rise has an interesting twist on this concept. He's accompanied by 2 smaller Izuchis that will actively sync up attacks with their leader. They will either lead or follow up, and their attacks do have a fair amount of knockback, making them real threats that you have to watch out for. In theory, because in practice they get caught up in your own attacks and die rather easily, so they end up not really mattering. It's still an interesting mechanic for a starter monster, however. Rachna Kadaki from Rise also works with minions in really wild ways. Her arachnoids crawl around and live on her back, and she'll often send them out, either as grappling hooks to pull her in a direction, or as attack extensions, as they're also capable of shooting webs or flames. What's fun is there's counterplay, because your weapons can sever her threads, which will cause a knockdown if successful. Rise also messes with pack mechanics in a third way, with rampages. A tower defense quest where you have to repel hordes of monsters up to 5 at once that come in waves. These are very chaotic battles that are not liked by most people, and as such did not return for Sunbreak. But it's fun to look back on them in the context of how they handled the constant onslaughts of monsters. For one, monsters would fall into 3 categories: gate crushers, who would beeline towards gates and single-mindedly attempt to destroy them; attackers, who are focused on taking you out or any defensive installations; and flyers, who would also do that but from the air, and they'd enter strongholds from any direction. Monster AI was also simplified, as attackers and flyers would taunt between attacks and regularly switch targets. Plus you had a league of defensive options to take them down. It wasn't too complicated to prioritize different roles. Take out the gate crushers immediately, as they're the most dangerous, then get on a ballista and take down the flyers. Then focus on the attackers last and you're all good. Unfortunately, people found them overwhelming. Dung bombs couldn't really repel these monsters, you had to use your weapons, but there were just so many of them, all doing different things that people simply did not have fun trying to take down so many targets at once. And so rampages did not return. Despite being far more controlled than the Doshaguma or Kutsuku packs, they were just too overwhelming for people, which may perhaps indicate why it's so simple to split up the Wilds packs. When 2 or more monsters come together in the same area, things get messy very quickly. This is by design. You should not want to be in that situation, and should figure out a way to dispel 1 or more of the monsters as soon as possible. Monster Hunter has frequently used this dynamic to create both unscripted and deliberate challenges in the past, and packs are no different. Wilds wants you to disperse them as soon as possible in order to isolate and take down the leader. You are not supposed to fight them together because it's not a very good experience. But what if that wasn't the case? What people and myself want from monster packs and Wilds is for them to be fightable in a way where dung pods aren't the easiest, simplest, or only way to neutralize them, for the game to force us to confront them as a group without an easy way of splitting them up, but in a battle that doesn't devolve into total chaos. A lot of chaos and monster aggression would be needed, but not as much as what we have now. Put it this way, if dung pods were to be erased from the game, how would we fight a Doshaguma pack as they are without it being a messy experience? Based on what we've discussed, I'm wondering if it would be good for them to have some sort of real strategies and coordination with each other that goes beyond the dogpile. Consider the Great Izuchi, and how his minions mirror and cover for his attacks, all in sync. What brings down that fight is that ultimately, the Izuchis are too small and have too little health, so they often die and don't end up mattering. As mentioned before, the advantage of Monster Hunter Wilds is that packs are formed of full-fledged large monsters that can put up much more of a fight, with their larger health pools, moveset variety and complexity. They wouldn't need to act precisely how the Azuchis do, but there's definitely room for different behaviours. I talked about Hirabami packs being challenging, but also fun, even without Dung bombs. It seems like a byproduct of the solo fight pacing. There can be gaps in his attacks as he repositions himself, and many of them, while damaging, are not so aggressive, which means as a group, the pacing becomes more intense but still manageable. I really like that, and don't think it needs much, if any, altering. Doshaguma and Kutsuku are more conventional monsters, which means that in typical Monster Hunter fashion, when 3 or 4 of them are together, things go to hell very quickly. If I had it my way, I would indeed have Kutsuku pairs coordinate attacks like the Great Izuchi. Doshaguma is the tricky one, since he roams in packs of 4 to 5 and there's one alpha. One Doshaguma that's clearly bigger and redder than the others, able to boss them around. I think it would be better if this battle was tougher and more overwhelming than the others for that reason, but it would once again run into the Rampage problem, where it's just inherently too overwhelming. Breath of the Wild's main basic enemy is the Bokoblin. They're highly advanced creatures that can become drastically different in fights depending on the weapon they're holding or who they're with. Tears of the Kingdom added the boss Bokoblin, who is often followed by several smaller ones. When they're with him, they'll act differently and follow his commands, taking a defensive formation around him and attacking in unison. It makes the boss more challenging, and the Bokoblins themselves obstacles that you have to get around in order to reach the big guy. To be honest, I wonder if Alpha Doshaguma would have to have similar direct command over his minions for a pack fight to be better. I think on some level, the lesser Doshagumas would have to hold back slightly and coordinate a strategy. It wouldn't have to be as rigid or squad-like as the boss Bokoblins, but they should probably hold back when necessary. For example, you often fight the pack in the Windward Plains open fields. What if they were to all circle you and take turns attacking, preventing you from easily escaping? I think this pack being bigger and having an alpha should make it more frantic and tougher than the other packs by default, but it seems like a difficult balance to achieve. When I saw the trailers for Wilds, I figured that the Doshaguma pack would be less oppressive than they'd be as individuals, which would be compensated by sheer numbers and a much stronger leader, and you would have to whittle down the pack by dealing enough damage to individual members to break them away for a while. I still think the idea is what could have been there, but what if it was centered around damaging the alpha? Hurt him enough so that he loses his aura, which causes the pack to abandon him and go somewhere else. It would ideally be damaged to a specific part like his head, and perhaps he could gain the aura periodically into the fight, which causes the pack to form again. I really hope it's something they try and change up for the expansion. Ultimately, I see the scrapping of Sunbreak Rampages as a sign as to why packs are like this. Monster Hunter games rarely ditch entire mechanics like this from game to expansion, especially not ones that took so much work. Lackluster mechanics tend to be improved or revamped, but rarely have we ever seen them get scrapped entirely, especially because it's clear that they did initially plan on having them. My guess is that they couldn't figure out how to fix the core issues people had with Rise's Rampages, and that would be how overwhelming they are. And to an extent, I would speculate that this might be why packs are so easy to disperse with dung bombs. It's not just because Monster Hunter has always handled multi-monster encounters like this, but because the combat is not really designed around you fighting more than one monster at once. 2 is barely manageable, but everything falls apart at 3. Rampage monsters specifically had their behaviour altered to not be as aggressive, and even they were too much for some people, so would reducing the intensity of pack Doshagumas really be enough to make them enjoyable? Without dung bombs, the packs are messy, and sadly not in a way that's very fun. The easiest and only solution is to throw a dung bomb. It's what the game wants us to do, and ignoring them leads to a miserable time. Regardless, I do hope they can be improved, because there's a lot of potential for this mechanic, and I hope they aren't left the way they are, or drop like Rampages. The fact they added a quest type that allows you to hunt every member does indicate that they have an interest in expanding the mechanic in the future, and giving us more ways to engage with them, but it's definitely something we'll have to wait for and see with the expansion. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to support me further, please consider donating to me on Patreon. You'll receive early access to YouTube videos, be credited on them, and have access to videos that are only exclusive to Patreon members. The link is in the description. What do you all think of packs? Have you ever tried facing them without dung bombs? What monsters do you hope could be made into pack fights in the future? Let me know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and have a good day.